Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 10 essential string serenades for beginners. Now, I already did a talk about orchestral serenades, and despite my request that we stick to the list and that people not add things that aren't on the list, a lot of you chimed in with string serenades, which is a whole different category, which I'd already had lined up, and so here it is, just so we're absolutely complete in serenadedom. Now, as I mentioned in the first video about these suckers, serenades are designed to be relaxing, mellow, enjoyable, multi-movement sectional pieces. Originally the sort of thing that you would play under the balcony or in the street or outdoors, or at a party or an event or some sort of thing like that. And they generally take the shape of symphonies, that is 4 movement pieces, but with extra movements to loosen up the form. Dance movements, concerto movements with soloists, all kinds of little extras. Sometimes in the later period, in the 19th century towards the 20th century, they include Baroque dances and things from different periods. It's whatever you can throw into them to make them sort of more just breezy and entertaining. That's the concept. And although originally serenades were basically written for woodwind instruments, because they were outdoor music, they quickly became very popular for string ensembles. And why not? String ensembles are gorgeous, and it's indoor music for the most part. So these are indoor serenades, but they are absolutely gorgeous, and some of them are the most famous and popular pieces in the repertoire. And those of you who are connoisseurs will know them quite well already. But if you don't, you're in for a treat, because this is just great, great stuff. Really, really beautiful music. So let's begin with the iconic string serenade, the most in the history of the universe, Mozart's Eine, kleine Nachtmusik, a little night music. And night music is what a serenade is. That is, you serenade in the evening. They happened mostly in the evening. That's when your beloved would be sitting on her balcony above the street with the open sewer. And, well, you don't want to know. This was pretty disgusting no matter what. But night music, yes. And we know Eine, kleine Nachtmusik is yam, bam, 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 bam. That thing? There it is. It's just a marvelous little piece. It can be played actually by a string quartet with a double bass added, or it can be played with a full string ensemble. It originally might have had a couple extra movements, but the 4-movement version, like a tiny little string symphony, is what has come down to us. And the rest is history. It's just in our musical DNA. We all know it because we've heard it so many times on commercials or in movies or whatever the heck. But that is the string serenade that began the string serenade tradition. And a lovely, lovely little work it is. Only about 12, 15 minutes long most of the time. It's tiny. Serenades can be much longer because they have extra movements, or much shorter because they're just light and relaxing divertissement. So there you go. Next, Dvořák, his Serenade for Strings. Oh, it's so beautiful. I say this about all these pieces because they're all beautiful. They have wonderful lyrical melodies. And, oh my God. Dvořák wrote 2 serenades, one for strings and one for woodwinds, or winds and horns, actually. And they're both incredibly popular and beautiful works that are standard repertoire. And the string serenade usually comes coupled with either Grieg or Tchaikovsky, which we're getting to next. Grieg, the Holberg suite. Now, the Holberg suite really is a serenade. It's a string orchestra work. It has a prelude, a suite of dances attached to it, and it's a general serenade-like thing. And it comes, like I said, it comes coupled with other string serenades. So I would be foolish to leave it off, because if I left it off, you would stick it on there anyway. So there it is, the Holberg suite. Now, Holberg was a Norwegian playwright guy who existed, a century or so before Grieg did. So the actual title is In Holberg's Time. It's not about Holberg. It's about his era, which was the Baroque or early classical period. And so you have a series of dances from that era. It was originally written for piano, but then Grieg arranged it for string orchestra, and it's just so beautiful. Like all of these pieces, beautiful. After Grieg, Tchaikovsky, the general coupling of the Dvořák. Usually it's like Dvořák and Tchaikovsky, they go together as string serenades because they're both sort of the same length. They're almost half an hour long each, and they have like, the waltz and the Tchaikovsky. Ya da da do 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 do. Ya da 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 da. I can't sing. My voice is wrecked, but my goodness, it's wrecked when it's not wrecked, but it's really wrecked now. The Tchaikovsky is another one of his most popular pieces. There is another, by the way, piece by Tchaikovsky that sometimes gets included in the string serenade world, his sextet, Souvenir de Florence, Souvenir of Florence, which can be played by a string orchestra too, and then it becomes kind of like a string serenade, but it's sort of a more formally normal piece. But still, I might as well just throw that out there, because if I don't, you will. So there you go. Tchaikovsky, Grieg, Dvořák, they form the nucleus of the Romantic Serenade universe, those three works. And so those are just essential, absolutely essential. After Tchaikovsky, Robert Fuchs, who wrote 5 serenades. Some of them use a little bit of woodwinds or some horns, and one of those occurs in my orchestral serenade list. Some of them are just for strings. And Robert Fuchs was a Viennese teacher who taught everybody. He taught Mahler, he taught Sibelius, he taught you name it. If you were in Vienna in the second half of the 19th century at the conservatory, Robert Fuchs was your teacher. But Fuchs was himself a composer, a conservative composer, but one of great charm. And these serenades are delicious. The 5 serenades. He was known as Mr. Serenade because they became quite popular in Vienna. And he wrote symphonies and concertos and other things too. And they're not bad either. But the serenades have the charm, the Viennese Gemütlichkeit, that relaxed pleasantness that we look for in string serenades, and they're absolutely delightful. Another really, really popular serenade is Elgar, his Serenade for Strings. Now, English composers did a lot of string orchestra pieces. Not all of them were serenades. There are more than the Elgar. There are more. Not all of them are on the list. Not all of them are essential, but they're quite lovely. The Elgar Serenade for Strings is an early work. It's only in, I think, 3 movements. It's rather short and very, very charming and almost a little diffident in its attitude. It has its relaxed quality in this sort of wistfulness, just a gentleness about the thing. It's just very touching, actually. And Elgar went on to write other pieces for string orchestra, like the Introduction and Allegro, which is gorgeous, and individual movements and other things like that. But there's a whole school of British music for string orchestra, and that could be another topic. Don't add anything to the list, friends. Thank you. I appreciate it. We're just doing the essential stuff, and the Elgar's definitely in there. Then Victor Herbert. Victor Herbert, the operetta guy, Babes in Toyland, Victor Herbert, that guy. Victor Herbert wrote some beautiful, not many, but some beautiful orchestral works. There's a gorgeous symphonic poem. I think, Hero and Leander. There's a cello concerto that inspired Dvořák to write his cello concerto. And there's a lovely Serenade for Strings, an absolutely beautiful work. It doesn't get as much play as it deserves to, but it really should be in there with like the Tchaikovsky and the Dvořák and the Grieg and those people. It's a rich, romantic, juicy piece of music. Absolutely delicious. And it should be in a short list of string serenades. Then we have the other Czech people, Josef Suk, who was Dvořák's son-in-law. He wrote a serenade for strings because his dad-in-law wrote a serenade for strings, and it's a beautiful work. Beautiful work. They're all beautiful works. They're beautiful. A charming piece of music, not as melodically, immediately catchy as the Dvořák, but because everything Suk wrote had a certain elegiac quality to it, a little bit like Elgar, this wistfulness about it. but it's really, really good music. He was a really solid composer, and his Serenade for Strings is a major entry in the Serenade for String universe. After Suk, we have the Swedish composer Dag Wirén. His string serenade is famous for the march, the last movement. Yum ba-da-dum bum bum ba-da-dum bum bum ba-da-dum bum ba-da-da-da-da. Yum ba-da-dum bum 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 bum. You may have heard the march part and not known where it's from. Wirén was an interesting composer. He was extremely self-critical. He wrote not a lot of music, and everything he wrote was very concise. I mean, he was a natural serenade person, short, to the point, not a note out of place, crisp and exquisitely crafted. And his whole string serenade, the whole thing, is only about, again, 15 minutes long, and delightfully, delightfully memorable. Catchy, fantastic piece. A contemporary piece, but one with total serenade-like friendliness. I mean, it sort of comes up and says, "Hi, how are you?" It's a very friendly piece, just really lovely. Last but not least, Samuel Barber, the American composer, his first piece, his Opus 1 was a string serenade. The Serenade Opus 1, full of that bittersweet lyricism that Barber became famous for in later works such as the Essays for Orchestra or the Adagio for Strings, which was a movement of his string quartet. A lovely early work and definitely worth hearing. So there you have it, my friends. 10 absolutely essential string serenades for you to sink your teeth into and relax to and snuggle up to on a cold winter day. They're just marvelous. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.